My name is Jessica, and 6 months ago I was ready to leave my husband. After 15 years of marriage, Michael and I had become strangers. We slept in the same bed but rarely touched. We ate at the same table but barely spoke. The love that had once burned so brightly between us had faded to nothing more than a dim memory. I'd spent years trying to fix us. Marriage counseling, date nights, weekend getaways. Nothing worked. Michael was consumed by his work, and I was tired of feeling invisible in my own home. So I made a decision. I would file for divorce and start over. At 42, I figured I still had time to find happiness. That's when I met Daniel. He was a parent at the school where I taught, recently divorced and struggling to raise his daughter alone. We connected during a parent-teacher conference, and what started as coffee to discuss his daughter's progress turned into lunch, then dinner, then more. Daniel made me feel alive again. He listened when I spoke. He looked at me like I was something precious. With him, I remembered what it felt like to be wanted, to be desired, to matter to someone. I know it was wrong to start something before officially ending my marriage. I know that makes me the villain in most people's eyes, but after years of emotional neglect, I was starving for connection, and Daniel offered it so freely. I had the divorce papers drawn up. I was going to tell Michael after our anniversary dinner one last gesture of respect for the years we'd shared. I had it all planned out. Then, Michael collapsed at work. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. The prognosis wasn't good. Just like that, everything changed. How could I leave him now? How could I hand him divorce papers while he was fighting for his life? I couldn't. So I stayed. The affair should have ended there. That would have been the decent thing to do, put my feelings aside, focus on my husband, be the supportive wife he needed during the worst time of his life. But I didn't end it. I kept seeing Daniel. In between hospital visits and chemotherapy appointments, I would sneak away to be with him. It was selfish and horrible, but those stolen moments were the only things keeping me sane amid the nightmare my life had become. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just coping, that Michael would never know, so what harm was there? Then one night, as I sat beside Michael's hospital bed, his hand found mine. His fingers were so thin now, his skin almost translucent. "I know about Daniel," he said quietly. My heart stopped. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Michael's eyes met mine, and I expected to see anger, betrayal, hurt. Instead, I saw something far worse. Acceptance. "How long have you known?" I finally managed to ask. "A few months," he replied. "I saw the texts on your phone when you asked me to find that recipe." I couldn't breathe. All this time, he'd known. He'd been fighting cancer, facing his own mortality, and carrying the knowledge of my betrayal? "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'll end it, right now, I promise." Michael shook his head slowly. "Don't." I stared at him, confused. "What?" "Don't end it," he said. "You're happy when you're with him, I can see it. After you've been with him, you come back different, lighter. You smile more. But Michael—" "Listen to me, Jess," he interrupted. "I'm not going to survive this. We both know that. The doctors say months, not years." He squeezed my hand weakly. "I don't want you to be alone when I'm gone." I broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably. How could he be so selfless? How could he think of my happiness when he was suffering so much? "I can't," I said. "I can't do that to you." He smiled sadly. "You already have, and I'm telling you it's okay." So I continued seeing Daniel, with my dying husband's blessing. It was the most surreal, morally complicated situation I could imagine. I'd go from holding Michael's hand through chemo sessions to falling into Daniel's arms hours later. I felt split in two, the dutiful wife and the woman in love. Michael deteriorated quickly. Within months, he was in hospice care. I spent every day with him, reading books, watching his favorite shows, reminiscing about our early days together when love flowed easily between us. Daniel was patient, understanding. He never pressured me, never complained about the limited time we had together. He knew my husband came first now, and he respected that. Then my sister came to visit. She'd flown in from across the country to say goodbye to Michael. She arrived at the hospice earlier than expected one day and saw me kissing Daniel in the parking lot. The look on her face, disgust, shock, disappointment, will haunt me forever. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Your husband is dying 20 feet away, and you're out here playing lover with some man?" I tried to explain about how Michael knew, how he had given his blessing, but the words sounded hollow, like excuses. My sister didn't believe me, or maybe she did, but it didn't matter. In her eyes, what I was doing was unforgivable. She told our parents. They told Michael's parents. Soon, everyone knew. The judgment was swift and merciless. I was called every name imaginable: monster, cheater, heartless. They couldn't understand how I could betray Michael when he needed me most. They didn't want to hear about his blessing or his wish for my happiness. To them, I was just a selfish woman who couldn't even give her dying husband the dignity of fidelity in his final days. My mother refused to speak to me. Michael's sister blocked my number. Friends I'd had for decades cut ties. Only Daniel stood by me, but even he seemed troubled by the situation, by the role he was playing in this tragic story. Michael died on a Tuesday morning with me holding his hand. He waited until we were alone, sent the nurses away, and used his last moments to whisper, "Be happy, Jess. Promise me." I promised him. Then he was gone. The funeral was tense, divided. Half the attendees wouldn't look at me. The other half watched me like hawks, waiting for me to show some sign of relief or happiness now that I was free to be with Daniel openly. I was neither relieved nor happy. I was devastated. Despite everything, I had loved Michael in my own way. We had shared a life, built a home, made memories. His absence left a hole in my world that nothing could fill. After the funeral, my mother cornered me. "How could you do this to him?" she demanded, her voice low but fierce. "How could you be so cruel?" "He knew," I said simply. "He wanted me to have someone." She shook her head, disgust written across her face. "So you say? Convenient that he's not here to contradict you." That's when I showed her the letter. Michael had written it during his last week, when speaking had become too difficult. A letter explaining his decision, absolving me of guilt, asking our family and friends to support me and Daniel after he was gone. My mother read it, her hands trembling. When she finished, she handed it back without a word and walked away. She still hasn't spoken to me. It's been 3 months since Michael died. Daniel and I are still together, trying to navigate a relationship born in secrecy and shadowed by death. Some days are easier than others. Some nights I wake up crying, overwhelmed by guilt despite Michael's forgiveness. Most of my family and friends still keep their distance. They say they need time. They say what I did was wrong regardless of Michael's blessing. Maybe they're right. So, am I the a-hole for continuing an affair while my husband battled cancer, even with his knowledge and approval? For finding comfort in another man's arms while my husband of 15 years suffered and died? I don't know anymore. I don't know if following Michael's wishes makes what I did right, or if the pain I've caused others outweighs his blessing. I don't know if I'm the villain or just a flawed human trying to find happiness in an impossible situation. All I know is that on his deathbed, my husband's last words were for me to be happy. And I'm trying. God, I'm trying. But happiness feels a lot like guilt these days.